Hello everyone, today I'm going to be reviewing Tears of Metal, a new Scottish medieval themed roguelike hack and slash game that was released into early access a little over a week ago. The simplest way to describe Tears of Metal is that it is what if Dynasty Warriors was a roguelike. I mean, that is already a thing, but what if it was done in a more traditional Warriors style this time? And also, what if it is also just very Scottish? The gameplay closely mimics the style of Warriors game with the 1 vs 100 gameplay where you are mowing down people relentlessly in a giant power fantasy. Before we get started with the review, I do need to disclose that I was given a key for this game for review purposes, and while I don't believe receiving this key will affect my final decisions on the game, I will always disclose to my audience whenever I'm given something for free for full transparency. Also, this game is in early access, so anything that I talk about in this review can and will be subject to change over time. If anything changes soon after this video goes up that I think needs amending, you'll be able to find it as a pinned comment below. Alrighty, now onto the review. So let's start off with the gameplay. If you're familiar with Warriors games, then you will feel right at home with Tears of Metal. This is the closest I've seen a non-Warriors game do Warriors gameplay. The mechanics are pretty simple. You have weapon combos that mix between light and heavy attacks, a dodge, a block, and a tight timing window for a parry on the block. And you also have a special meter as well, where filling the bar to full will allow your character to use a special attack. You also come with your own mini army that you can issue commands with at the cost of some of your special bar. The mechanics of the game itself are pretty easy to get around, but the game feels pretty difficult, especially at first, and that's because the game is extremely punishing. Dealing with enemies, especially the elites, mini-bosses and bosses, all really comes down to pattern recognition. A lot of enemies have a set attack pattern or a particular way they're meant to be fought, and once you learn them, it's not that bad. But you'll probably lose a lot of runs early on, learning this stuff. For the most part, I think you can get away with just using your dodge and block. I don't think parrying is a full necessity. It is helpful, but trying to parry everything is very dangerous. And while healing isn't rare in Tears of Metal, it is costly. It does cost a lot of currency to do, which makes this game very punishing for mistakes. And it can be just one bad messed up encounter that makes the difference if a run is going to be viable or just kind of like a messed up slog, which I do like. The only real issue is that the game does get extremely hard, especially towards the end, with more and more enemies that have harder and harder attacks to read, and runs can last well over an hour, which does make it a bit of a focus-based endurance test, especially because at the moment the game doesn't have any mid-run saving. So the game does have to be beaten in one session or one very long pause menu if you want to take breaks. Throughout your runs, you'll also be presented with perk upgrades that work a little bit like Hades, where they slot into your light attack or your heavy attack or your block or dodge, or sometimes they can go into a passive slot along with the items that you collect throughout your run. They last for the run, and I do feel like they are a bit on the underwhelming side. They aren't particularly bad. They all each have their own category that focuses on a certain style of gameplay, but the categories don't really have a lot of synergy between each other, and it doesn't feel like that part of the game has been thought out too much. Like I said, it's not exactly bad, but it does feel like some runs can be made or broken by the choices you make, and it's just kind of trial and error to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So Tears of Metal only has 3 playable characters currently in the game. They all have their own distinct playstyles. The first character, Wallace, has a very balanced playstyle. Brienne, who's the second character you'll unlock, is much more fast-paced and focused on keeping a combo meter up, but she's also very squishy. And then there's the big hammer man that I don't remember his name, but he's slow and has, for some reason, an almost non-existent block meter. But he's tanky and is the only character that can naturally heal himself and other players if you're playing multiplayer. Each character also has about 3 to 4 unlockable weapons each, and every weapon actually completely changes up the combos that the characters can do, giving an extra bit of depth on top of them all already feeling unique to play. I do wish there were more characters. I know that there are some planned. There's 2 on the cover art that aren't in the game. And the thing is, those 2 that aren't in the game look like the most interesting ones, which is a bit of a shame. But they're coming eventually. I think the devs are planning to release a roadmap sometime in the near future. So the kind of format or the objective of the game is to make your way from the left side of the map to the right, where each location will have an encounter. 95% of them are battle encounters, which you'll get a reward for beating. At the end of the map, you will face a boss and then rinse repeat through 3 areas until you beat the game. Now, Tears of Metal has a bit of a risk versus reward system that echoes throughout a lot of the design choices with the game, and it kind of starts with this. Every time you visit a location on your way to the boss, it will increase your overall threat count throughout your run, and when your threat count hits certain milestones, it will make the game harder, whether that be filling encounters with tougher enemies, or archer towers, or added time-related objectives to your battles, which is how the game was to be played. So it's kind of similar with the block and parry system. Like, parrying is much more rewarding, but harder to pull off and more dangerous. You know, visiting challenge shrines in the run is rewarding, but at some point you may overplay your hand and suddenly you're out of your depth, which is a sign that there's a good bones of a roguelike in here. A lot of roguelikes do go off of risk versus reward. And I think I probably lost most of the runs in this game that I played due to just overestimating my ability and just tricking myself into a death. I think the gameplay overall for Tears of Metal is very, very solid. Just from mechanics wise and gameplay wise, it feels extremely great to play. I do think the boons need a bit of a reworking a little bit, but that's fine. One thing I'll note that I'm not a particular fan of is the meta progression in the game. You have a town which kind of acts as your menu for all your permanent upgrades, where you can upgrade your characters, change their gear, upgrade your soldiers, companions, and other things that can change in the runs themselves. And they all use a bunch of different currencies that you collect throughout your runs, which is fine, but the time you need to put in to like upgrade a lot of this stuff takes a long time. Sometimes a game being a little bit grindy is fine, but this is like, the balance is extremely off with this. I think the meta progression stuff is way too slow, and the stuff that you unlock doesn't feel as rewarding for the time you put in. Alright, so moving on to the story. The story of this game is as simple as they come. Your land has been taken over by hostile invaders, and now it's time to take it back. You start the game as William Wallace trying to take back your land on a campaign throughout Scotland, where you have to mow down the English by the hundreds as they slowly start to become more strange and maybe even supernatural. And that's about it for the story. It's pretty light on, though there is some more depth if you want to read a couple of the letters that come along with the characters, but totally ignorable if not. The main focus so far in the game just seems to be making sure the tone of the game works, filling it with interesting and fun designs for characters, bosses and mini-bosses, rather than giving them all in-depth, unique lore, which I think was the right call here. I think forcing more story into the game may bog it down, when its greatest strength is how good and streamlined the gameplay experience is. And something that works towards that is the art style. Feels very much in tone with the game. It has an almost hand-painted quality to it that has also just been covered in a layer of dirt and grime. Again, it works, it's a great aesthetic. I do admit some of the portraits in the game look a little bit unfinished, and some of them look straight up not like the character they're meant to be of, but those are pretty minor nitpicks against what is a tonally and stylistically coherent aesthetic that looks good. Also adding to the aesthetic of the game is the music. It's a Scottish Warriors-like game, so the soundtrack is expectedly a lot of metal and a lot of bagpipes. And it absolutely works. The soundtrack for this game is pretty awesome. It's got a frenetic energy that matches the pace of the gameplay the same way a Warriors game does. And also it has some, nice atmospheric tracks for when things are slower. Again, a lot of bagpipes. If you hate bagpipes, you're probably going to hate the music. Moving on to performance. My specs are on the screen now. There are only really 2 graphic settings in the game, and I had both of them at max. For the most part, I was able to run Tears of Metal at 60 FPS, though the later into the game I got, the more likely it was to have some kind of major performance drops due to the amount of troops on screen. And also if I was ever running a build that had a lot of particle effects like explosions on it. I don't think the game ever became unplayable, but I suspect that people with worse rigs than mine might start to see frame drops happen earlier in the game than I did. Which is actually pretty much what happened to me when I played the game on Steam Deck. Tears of Metal is rated for Steam Deck, and after giving it a go, look, the performance wasn't great. I did have to lower some of those 2 graphics effects to have a more stable frame rate, but it is still a little bit all over the place. I would call the game playable though. Like, I was able to get one of my deepest runs in the game while playing on the Steam Deck, despite the performance issues. So yeah, I would still call it playable, but it is not ideal. In conclusion, would I recommend Tears of Metal? Yes, absolutely. I think this game is very, very good. I have put in just about 15 hours into the game as of posting the review, and maybe because I just really love the Warrior style of gameplay. Dynasty Warriors is one of my favorite series of all time, so, my bias is there. That's where my bias lies, and I really like this game too. I feel like this game is almost firing on all cylinders in terms of quality. It's really only the meta progression as well as some of the roguelike elements in the performance are the things that I could knock this game for. They aren't like overly bad, it's just not as good or refined as it could be. The meta progression is something the devs have already communicated via Steam news posts that they're looking at tweaking, as well as performance and the ability to save the game in mid-run, which would be nice considering the runs are fairly long, and a good run will almost usually be over an hour to an hour and a half. So I'm yet to beat the game. Probably a skill issue, but I would put the estimated time to beat at around the 13-hour mark, but that could vary pretty highly depending on how good you are at the game. But there is certainly enough content here to go on for much longer if you're looking to unlock everything as well. Of course, some of that does come down to the game just being kind of overly stingy with the currencies. So the game is about $23 USD or $35 Australian, and is available now on Xbox Series S and X and PC via Steam or Xbox Game Pass. With it being early access, I do recommend you buy the game if you're happy with the quality of the game now, rather than what it could be in the future. But as it stands for me, I very much think the game is worth the asking price, despite the problems that I have with the game. Alright, that is all I have to say on Tears of Metal, so thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, then please leave it a like, and if you are new here, then please consider subscribing. As always, many thanks to my YouTube members for their continued support, absolute legends. That's it for now, so I will see you all soon with something. Alright, see ya.